What about our love, Miley?
You promised me that we would stay together forever.
It's over between us. I'm going to marry someone else soon. You're poor, and you won't be able to provide me with everything I need. Goodbye. Hi, I'm Miley. I'm going to share my story with you. It may not be exciting or even painfully sad, but it's definitely worth mentioning as others might learn from it. I'm a beautiful girl who grew up in a middle-class family. I had a friend at school named Steve who always stood up for me when someone bothered me. We used to study together, and he helped me with everything. We studied hard because we decided to enter the same engineering college so that we could work together in the future. Years passed, and we entered the same university. We went to and from college together every day and attended lectures together. If one of us got sick, the other would go to the university to record the lectures and explain them to the other the next day. Over time, our friendship developed into intense love. And we agreed that Steve would propose to me after we graduated and he got a good job. As time went by, our love grew stronger, but there was something that bothered me. My friends at the university came from affluent families, wore stylish clothes every day, and drove their cars. Meanwhile, I kept wearing my old clothes all the time. And when I asked my parents for money to buy what I needed, they only gave me a little. When I shared my concerns with Steve, he comforted me and asked me not to pressure my parents. He assured me that when he graduated and started working, he would give me everything I desired. I tried to convince myself of his words, but as time went on, I started arguing with Steve and my parents because I wanted to be like my friends and have what other girls have. The situation continued like this. I asked for a lot, but received very little, and then I would turn to Steve for comfort, and he would promise to give me everything I wished for. Then one day, when I returned home after Steve dropped me off as usual, my mother asked me to dress in my best clothes because a young man was coming to propose to me and wanted to meet me. I didn't know how to describe my feelings at that moment. I felt like I was frozen in place from shock, and my inner voice kept saying, "A young man proposed to me. What about Steve? I've loved him for years and he loves me too. I definitely won't agree to this." So I decided to pretend to be calm and meet him, and then reject him by claiming that he is not suitable and that I want to graduate first. Indeed, the awaited groom named Brian arrived. He was a few years older than me and had a good job in a company with a very good financial status. He was the kind of person that all girls wish for, but not me. We talked about several things, and I felt that he was interested in me. Later, when my parents asked for my opinion, I refused, using the excuse of my studies. However, they asked me to seriously consider it because they approved of him, considering his excellent financial status and his ability to provide everything I needed. Honestly, I don't know why this conversation kept revolving in my mind all day long. I decided not to tell Steve about anything that happened. In the following days, Brian kept visiting us regularly, bringing me gifts that I really liked, especially since Steve couldn't afford such precious gifts due to his financial circumstances. The situation continued like this until I started picking fights with Steve for no reason, and I don't know why. But I felt that he would never be able to fulfill what I wished for. Even if he graduated and found a job, his financial situation wouldn't change much, unlike Brian, who had his own apartment and a very good financial status. So I made the decision to accept Brian and break up with Steve because sooner or later our love would end due to poverty. I met Steve and told him about a guy proposing to me and that I accepted him. He looked at me laughing as if I were joking with him or telling him a fictional story. But when he realized that I was being sincere and didn't want to continue our relationship, he reproached me, saying,
How could I forget a love that lasted for years for the sake of someone who could provide me with a better financial status?
That is my decision, and it had nothing to do with it.
I always loved you, but I will let that love go as you did, and that one day you will regret it.
Then he left, and for the first time, I felt that I had made a mistake by letting go of Steve. I could hear the pain in his voice, but I couldn't change my decision despite that. Indeed, I informed my parents of my acceptance of Brian, and days passed by. I got married, and I lost touch with Steve. I didn't know anything about him. After years had passed, one day I went to my husband's workplace to tell him something. But I found him in a meeting with the company's manager, so I decided to wait for him. When the meeting was over, I saw my husband talking to another man and handing him important files. From his elegant attire and what seemed like great wealth, I deduced that he was the company's manager, but I couldn't see his face because he had his back towards me. I called out Brian's name, and at that moment, both he and the company's manager turned around. I felt an intense shock. Oh my God, it's Steve! How did this happen? The question kept echoing in my mind until my husband approached me and introduced me to Steve as his wife. Steve greeted me as if he didn't know me, despite being the company's manager. Then, my husband asked me to wait for him while he fetched his phone. For the first time in 2 years, I stood face to face with Steve, and I didn't know what to say. I just kept staring into his eyes, hoping to see the love that used to envelop me in the past, a look filled with triumph and joy at seeing me. However, it was cold and devoid of any emotions he had for me before. Suddenly, Steve spoke up and asked me about my well-being. I told him I was fine, and when I asked him how and when he became the manager of the company where my husband worked, he smiled and said,
Did you think I wouldn't achieve success and reach the financial level that led you to leave me and marry someone else? What do you think of me now, madam? I own this company and many others. How and when it happened is none of your concern. But let me tell you something. I have regretted every moment of the past years because I once loved you. I truly wish to seek revenge, but seeing, in this situation is the ultimate revenge for me.
And when I tried to speak, he warned me, saying,
Don't you dare say anything. All women desire me now, and I will marry someone I know is sincere and ready to stand by me in all circumstances.
Then Steve left. I truly don't know how to describe my feelings at that moment, but I regretted everything I did to Steve, and now I wish time could turn back so I could correct the mistake I made.